So last week we spoke about what happens when we are wounded. Our ungodly self-reliance causes us to react to our wounds in a way that we ought not to, and instead try to deal with everything on our own, the pain on our own, as I was quoting from C.S. Lewis. Why am I speaking so much about topics that seem to pertain more to psychology than to spirituality? Well, there's two reasons. One, because psyche, that is where we get the word psych from, is Greek for soul, and all true and good psychology is going to be spiritual as well. Secondly, because this topic that I've been preaching on, and particularly today, is the one that I most commonly have to refer to in the confessional and in pastoral counseling. That's how important it is. It's based on the fact, the principle, that grace builds on nature. Grace builds on nature. God's grace can only function in us insofar as our nature is disposed to receive it and work with it. Therefore, if there are problems on the natural level, as in psychological, then it's going to make it more difficult to correspond to God's grace. So what I'm going to speak about today is how to deal with our feelings as Christians. Now, what is the first rule in dealing with any subject? You have to... Okay. The other two masses got it. At least someone. No one? Okay. Define your terms. You need to remember that. The first thing you always need to do is define your terms. So what do we mean by feelings? We're going to use the classical term passions. So when we say feelings, we're going to refer to them as the passions. The passions are love, hatred, delight, sorrow, pain, hope, despair, fear, daring, and anger. In other words, they are interior movements of the soul, but not the intellect nor the will. So it's a third aspect of the soul. And they're called passions because, by the definition of the word, they happen to us. Now, because they happen to us, our feelings are not sins. Feelings are not sinful. A sin must be a deliberate choice. And since a feeling in and of itself is not a deliberate choice, feelings cannot be sinful. Jesus was angry. Jesus was sad. St. Paul tells the Ephesians, be angry, but do not sin, which means it must be possible to do so. So, feelings are not sinful, but we may, and very often do, make deliberate choices because of our feelings which are sinful. And this is something we need to teach our children as well. Of course, a lot of us need to learn it for ourselves. But our children need to learn that they should not be ashamed of their feelings, of having feelings. That is not something that we should be ashamed of. In the confessional, I'm constantly hearing people confessing things like anger. And I have to tell people, and especially children, no, being angry is not a sin. What did you do in your anger that was sinful? That is what you should be confessing. So, what are the rules for dealing with your feelings? Well, there are 4 of them. The first one is to feel your feelings. Don't suppress them and don't distract from them. Number 2 is do not left brain your feelings. That is, try to convince yourself of the reasons why you should not be feeling the way you're feeling. Number 3 is do not sin. That is, do not let your emotions fuel deliberate thoughts, words, and physical actions, or withhold those by omission that are sinful. And 4, surrender these feelings to God in prayer. Gaspar, this is really important. So, again, this is very critical that we learn this because I'm constantly having to deal with this in the confessional and pastoral counseling. So please pay attention. Now, before I do anything else, though, with my explanations, I do want to make one clarification. This process may not be necessary for those who are emotionally healthy and mature. The problem is that most people are not completely emotionally healthy and mature, and the worst part is that many people don't even realize it. But for those who are, this may not be a necessary process. But for most of us, this is a healing process which allows us to come into a proper relationship with our feelings and deal with them in a godly way. Now, let's look at the rules then. Again, the first one is to feel your feelings. Suppression is the technical term for something that we all do where we're pushing down or pushing away the feelings that rise up inside of us because we think we're not supposed to feel them. And that includes even the physical sensation. And you all know what I'm talking about. That bubbling in the chest or that swelling or whatever it is, that flush that comes with emotions. And we very often do our best to get rid of that as if it's bad, but it's not. Now, not every moment is the right moment to be expressing or dealing with your feelings. ER nurses don't have the luxury of dealing with the emotions that come with their job. Parents should not always be doing this, etc., etc. But the fact is that they do need to be dealt with at some point, and the sooner the better. You keep pushing them off, and it gets worse. Suppressed feelings are going to fester. But neither should we constantly distract ourselves from our feelings. At the root of most vices that are confessed that I hear are unresolved feelings. And I'm talking about those Christians who are truly trying to be Christian. Those Catholics who are trying to live the faith, who are practicing virtue, who are praying every day, who are going to confession, who are going to Mass, and yet still falling into habitual vices. It's usually because they are self-medicating so that they don't have to feel their feelings, because the feelings are uncomfortable. Instead of suffering the feelings and dealing with it in a healthy manner, they reach for sugar and carbohydrates. I've never heard of anyone having a carrot problem because of stress. Alcohol, social media, impure images and videos, pharmaceuticals, the credit card, the dumbbell even healthy activities can be used as a drug to avoid our feelings, to deaden the pain. The problem is, for most of us, is that we've lived our entire lives this way, and it requires self-awareness to say, oh, that's why I'm snacking as much as I am. That's why I'm spending so much time on the damn phone. It's because I am reaching for that so that I do not have to feel the discomfort of my feelings. And this is all the sad result of living an unmortified life. That is, a failure to live a life of fasting and penance. And it's only made worse by the fact that the church has not helped you do this, because our laws on fasting are so weak that there is hardly anything that we are required to do. And if we're not required to do it, we're probably not going to do it. Now, I will say that if trauma is bad enough, that it's better for you to reach for a non-sinful habit than for a sinful one. But you still need to work on these things so that you can wean yourself even of that. Rule number 2 is we should not left brain our feelings. The left side of the brain is the more logical and rational side. This is the side that makes us tell ourselves, or even worse, tell other people, and please stop doing things like this. Oh, don't feel so bad. There are people who have it a lot worse. Doesn't help the person who's hurting at the moment. Doesn't help their feelings at all. Or if you're pious, you'll say something like, offer it up. For most Catholics, offer it up is a fake holy way of saying stop complaining. Neither of these things are helpful. People need to learn that it is okay to feel these things. Yes, we should certainly offer unpleasantness inside or interior or physically to God, but you can't offer it if it's not yours. If you don't own it by accepting it and even embracing it, you can't actually then offer it to the Lord. It's not just shoving it off on Him, it's taking it and giving it to Him deliberately. Number 3, we must not sin regardless of our feelings. To simply feel your feelings is different from, in those feelings, deliberately thinking about something, saying things, or doing things, or again, not thinking as you ought to, not speaking as you ought to, and not acting as you ought to. We may not, without sin, deliberately choose to foster or speak or act on some of our feelings, especially when they are hurtful to others, which degrade their dignity as creatures of God. It's difficult, but it is possible with practice to allow yourself to feel, but without sin. And finally, number 4, we have to surrender these feelings to Jesus. As we allow the feelings to remain and we experience them, whatever it is, including the physical sensation of maybe that surging in the chest that we get, we have to offer it to Him. I like the image of even just visually imagining that I'm taking whatever is that's going on inside of me at the moment and shooting it out at Him, so to speak, into His sacred heart and letting it be caught up in the flames that are in the flames of love of His heart. It's a very beautiful image. If, for example, Iron Man's arc reactor in his chest works for you, that works too. I don't care what you use, but the idea is that we're surrendering. If you didn't know what I just said, don't worry about it. It doesn't apply to you. But whatever images that you use is something that can help you make this act of surrender, whatever works, in order to give it to our blessed Lord. Now, I just want to conclude then with just an additional word on this subject, this last point. Naturally, prayer is essential to our relationship with God because prayer is communication, and communication is essential to all relationships. And while we may not share everything with our earthly loved ones, sometimes with a good reason, there is nothing that we do not share with God. Let me rephrase that. There is nothing that we should not share with God. Humanity's historic response to difficulties from Adam and Eve on has been to run away from God. And you see how well that worked for them. Instead of running from God in our difficulties, we need to be running to Him, even when there are sins and even when it's sinful. We should be running towards Him. An image that I really love is from St. Jean-Marie Vianney. For those of you who actually like dogs will appreciate it even more than I do. He says, "I throw myself at the foot of the tabernacle like a dog at the foot of his master." Let us then give it all to Him. Don't hold back. Don't try and fix it all on your own. "Oh Jesus, I surrender myself to you completely. Take care of everything."